Hi, this is Stephanie Miller from The Stephanie Miller Show. Please enjoy this exclusive clip from my show on Political Voices Network. Well, I've quoted you before about the whole, Nixon was a president that became a criminal, and Trump is a lifelong criminal that became president, right? And you tweeted, you said in praising the accuracy and credibility of John Dean and saying Michael Cohen could be as believable as a witness, I erred in saying John was convicted of perjury. He wasn't. Dean pled guilty to obstruction of justice and admitted supervising payments of, wait for it, hush money.
Yep.
And you said the hush money is especially relevant to the expected charges in New York against Trump. The Watergate hush money was to keep the Watergate burglars from revealing their connection to the Nixon reelection campaign and the White House apologies to John. I hope Michael is as good a witness. Just take everybody through that, because you forget about that part of Watergate, the hush money, right?
Absolutely.
Well, you don't. We do.
Hush money was definitely a major component. And it's really interesting because the reason that they needed to keep the money paying was so that the burglars, who otherwise would have been seen as just burglars breaking in to this strange place, the DNC, but the reason was they had $100 bills on them that were from a cashing of a check, of a campaign check. And so the serial numbers on that could have been traced back to the campaign check that was cashed in Florida by one of the burglars. And that would have been the immediate proof that this was a political crime, that this was the result of the campaign paying the burglars. So they tried to use the CIA to stop the FBI from following the money trail. They tried to keep the burglars themselves from ever testifying who had hired them. And so they kept paying them hush money. And I'm so glad that you pointed out about my praising the credibility of John Dean, because that was what that tweet was all about. And what is absolutely true is that he was completely credible. He made no mistakes. And the same thing is true with Cohen.
Yeah.
He hasn't made any mistakes that have been at least publicly shown to be errors in anything he has testified to under oath. And the same is true for John Dean. He was completely corroborated in everything he said, and the jury believed him and convicted based on his testimony.
And, of course, this clip has surfaced of Trump's present lawyer, Taco Pino, on CNN, saying exactly what, we've all been saying. That's ridiculous to think Michael Cohen did this all on his own, just took out a loan and paid off a porn star. Why? Right? I mean, so now, and obviously so it looks like there was communication between Taco Pina and Stormy Daniels. So what does that mean, Jill? What's the word? He has to recuse? He has to, what happens?
It means that there's a conflict of interest,
Right.
and that unless Michael Cohen waives that it's a serious issue. Now, it's very unclear to me whether he ever actually was hired as Michael Cohen's lawyer. It seems that he was never hired as.
Right.
It does seem as if they had
Well,
a conversation.
or Stormy Daniels. It looks like Stormy Daniels consulted with him, and the judge is ordering those communications
yes,
be released.
But both did. I
Right.
mean, clearly Michael Cohen did, and the person that we're concerned about now is whether he doesn't seem to have actually represented either of them. Neither hired him, but any conversations about potentially being the lawyer for someone are equally protected by attorney-client privilege. And so the attorney can prevent that lawyer, the client can prevent the lawyer from testifying by claiming attorney-client privilege.
Yeah.
And any respectable lawyer would not go ahead and publicly say anything without having a waiver.
You know what I've learned from this is when I get charged with a crime, which I think it's probably a when, I'm going to go consult with every single one of the sisters-in-law, you and Barb McQuaid and Joyce Vance, so that no one else can hire you.
Exactly. And so that we can't testify against you.
That's
ever.
correct.
But
That's correct.
We wouldn't because we adore you, and it wouldn't happen.
Thank you, Jill. So let's talk about this whole, you retweeted Michael Steele. He said, I'm tired of hearing any indictment of Trump is unprecedented. Yes, it is, because it's unprecedented for a former president to pay hush money to a porn star. And his unhinged response, we've seen his desire for violence before, and for the GOP, it's all politically motivated. You just said amen. I mean, I have to say, that was the horrible thing about the Nixon pardon, wasn't it? Is it did prove someone's above the law. And by the way, the American people agreed with you. It's part of, they say now, why, Ford was not elected because people
Yes.
disagreed with him pardoning Nixon,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I regret that Nixon wasn't indicted because then we wouldn't be talking about it's unprecedented to indict a former president. Um, it's one of those things where he's guilty because the facts show he's guilty because they line up with all the elements of a crime. And it would be unethical for any prosecutor to ignore those facts. And crimes are crimes, they have to be indicted. People have to be held accountable. And being the former president has nothing to do with whether you get indicted or not.
Yeah. And by the way, Joe, I know it's hard for any of us to, know what's happening when anymore. We've just been talking about a bunch of the different cases, but wow, it sure seems like there was a lot going on at once, right? So Tuesday evening, federal prosecutors in Jack Smith's office presented compelling preliminary evidence that shows Trump knowingly and deliberately misled his own attorneys regarding his unlawful retention of classified documents. Right, Judge Beryl Howell wrote, "This is basically that Evan Corcoran they have to see these communications because of the crime fraud exception." Right?
Exactly. And I think that there's no way that this is going to go in Donald Trump's favor. If you get a court saying you have 6 hours to make your case, you have 6 hours to rebut the case that the defendant is making to the prosecutors, and gives a 6 a.m. deadline to the prosecutors and a midnight deadline last night to Trump's lawyers,
Yeah.
I would predict, maybe not while we're on air right now, but sometime today, there's going to be a ruling that the crime fraud exception means that Corcoran has to testify.
Yep.
And that's going to be very, very important. It is the clearest evidence of absolute obstruction of justice of the investigation of the classified documents, because Corcoran, as is being reported, and of course we don't know anything except what's reported, is that he says Donald Trump told me this, and that's what I put into the affidavit. That
Yeah.
means that Donald Trump, who had a classified evidence in his desk drawer, knowingly lied to his lawyer to say, put this in the affidavit for the federal government. That's obstruction of justice. Clean, clear,
Yeah.
easy case to prove.
So he's on a losing streak, Jill. I mean, which makes me feel like his delay tactics are finally running out. The judge yesterday said no delay in Tish James' case. That will go forward. Trump has lost his final bid to keep key evidence out of the E. Jean Carroll rape trial, correct?
Yes.
It just, boy, it does feel like finally justice is coming, doesn't it? Again, don't know exactly when and where, but
It does.
yeah.
Yeah, it feels that way. And I know from my Twitter followers that people are still holding their breath because every other time, and as you
Yeah.
said, Nixon became a criminal in office. Donald Trump has gotten away with crimes way before he was elected. And so the question is, will he skirt again? Will he have that Teflon that prevents him? I don't think so. I really feel like this is real. And I also feel like even Trump supporters, not all of them, but even some of the MAGA crowd will finally see the facts. Some of the Fox viewers are finally seeing that Fox lied to them. And they're now starting to say, oh, I no longer believe that the election was stolen. So maybe there is hope to go back to the era of Watergate when facts
Yeah.
mattered
Yeah.
and
Well,
when
you,
Republicans believed them.
yeah, you and I have talked about it before. As many people have said, Nixon, wouldn't have probably been impeached or resigned if there were Fox News back then, right? And so I think that's a really key fact. You also, by the way, just in terms of the ongoing danger, Frank Leguzzi was talking about the Waco, that's his first rally. And you
Yes.
said surely he intended to make clear his reason for opening with Waco evil. Um, I mean, obviously he is inciting violence again, and that's why we've got to have justice, because he is a clear and present danger, isn't he?
Absolutely.